Hey there, welcome to this episode of Yall-itics. Wheeler has a few days off, so I'm going solo here with a rare interview for this episode. Someone who does not often sit down with reporters. It's Beau French, and those who have watched Texas politics for a few minutes likely know his name. He is now the Republican nominee for Texas Railroad Commission. But French has made a lot of headlines with controversial comments that he has posted online over the last few years when he led the Tarrant County Republican Party. During the primary for this campaign, Governor Abbott said that Beau French would be bad for business. But then French shocked the establishment and defeated the Republican incumbent in this position. The governor has now welcomed Beau French to the ticket. So why is this such a big deal? The Texas Railroad Commission has nothing to do with trains, as you likely know. It's the state agency that regulates oil and gas, the heart and soul of the Texas economy. But over the next half hour here, we're talking to French and his Democratic challenger, John Rosenthal. But we're going to start with French here. His priorities, one thing he wants the legislature to do, and whether he regrets anything he has said online. Beau, good to see you. Thanks for coming in.
Jason, great to be here. Thank you.
Congrats on the nomination. We'll discuss some controversy in a moment. Let's start with your priorities, though, if you're elected in November. You say you're committed to ending overbearing regulation through the Railroad Commission. Give us an example. What type of regulation you'd like to end?
Yeah, so actually last year, the Railroad Commission passed a bunch of new regulations. It's kind of the first time they'd updated their regulations, especially on the environmental front, in a long time. And you know, I work with a lot of people in the oil industry, and not everybody's very happy about those regulations. So for me as a business guy, my background is in business, not a politician. I look at things, how can we have a regulatory framework that is good for all of the oil business in Texas? It is our most important business, as you know. We produce almost half the crude oil in the United States. It's a national security issue. It's why Donald Trump has focused on Venezuela and Iran, you know, looking at the free flow of oil around the world and who's getting that oil. So I view it as this is our most important industry in Texas, and we need to have a regulatory framework that protects that and allows people to get in and compete. And some of the new regulations they passed, especially on the environmental side, they try to mimic some of the things they do in New Mexico or even California, where they're very, as you know, anti-oil in those states. These
but this is a
Democrat-run states.
Republican Railroad Commission. I mean, this is a conservative commission here.
It is, but the way the commission works is you have, you know, there are 1,000 employees, right? You have the bureaucrats underneath. Some of them are very pro-business. Some of them may not be very pro-business, but a lot of them, or some of them apparently, when they were writing these rules, they drafted things that, again, were mimicking blue state, almost like Biden EPA type regulations. And so what I would do is look at the regulatory framework. How can we improve that in a way that is beneficial for everybody in the oil business, protects landowners? I'm a landowner, I'm a rancher. I'm a steward of the land, I'm a steward of the resources, and I think we need to have a commission that does that and a focus on that. And so one of the things I would do would be look to roll back some of those regulations, not everything. I'm not anti-regulation, we have to have some regulations, but I do kind of fall in the Donald Trump mindset of, you know, if we're going to add a regulation, we need to get rid of 10 other regulations. And so, you know, Texas is a huge state. It's 1,000 miles across. Yeah. The environmental needs in far west Texas, where we get 8 inches of rain a year, are very different than the environmental needs in East Texas, where you get 80 inches of rain a year. And so having a one-size-fits-all regulatory framework, I think, is not great for the business. And again, I'm just a business guy, and I'm used to looking at businesses, analyzing businesses. How do we make them better? How do we make them stronger? And one of the ways we can do that is look at having a regulatory environment for all the different kind of oil companies. You know, we have majors that are giant public companies, sure, down to small mom-and-pop independents. And so I think we need to have a system designed where it's fair for everybody.
Are you just talking about environmental regulations you'd like to repeal or at least amend, or are there other ones specifically that you'd like to extract?
Well, that was the biggest increase in the in what they did last year with the rules change. And really, these rules are just now going into effect. Yeah. So they really haven't had, and they're going to hurt the business. We really haven't felt
it more expenses or what?
Yeah, massively increasing paperwork and expense on operators. And so one of the things they did, you'll hear about this, there's actually a pending lawsuit now against the Railroad Commission trying to stop some of these new environmental regulations. But they took 1 page of environmental regulations and they turned it into 75 pages. I mean, you and I both know, anytime a centralized government, bureaucracy comes out with with a bunch of environmental regulations, it's not going to be good for the business.
Are you surprised, though, that a Republican Railroad Commission would pass so many more of these regulations?
Look, like I said, there were people on both sides of this issue, Republicans and Democrats. Not all of them are bad, not all of them are good. And so what I want to do is go in and make it more fair for everybody.
You also promised to get rid of the influence of radical Islam and the Chinese Communist Party in Texas oil. What type of influence are they exerting right now?
Well, I think that, look, I travel the state. I talk to people all across the state. Everybody I talk to, literally every Republican primary voter I talk to, 100% of them were concerned about the influence of Islam in Texas. And so what I think part of my victory in the primary was because Republican primary voters are primarily interested in supporting candidates who speak to the things that they care about. Yeah. And I was one of the first people to do that. I was out statewide, a couple of years ago talking about just the threat of Islam in general in Texas. And I think having people in office who are talking about the values that Texans care about is what resonates. And so how do you do that specifically in the Railroad Commission? Sure. One, I will have a statewide platform. I will be able to call the governor. I will be able to call legislators. I'll be able to work with the legislature to look at ways that we could reduce the influence of Islam in Texas, not just in the oil industry, but everywhere. And I think that's what voters are demanding.
And that's why you were nominated. But what influence do they have now? I mean, there's a number of Chinese landowners, but what type of influence does the Chinese Communist Party and Islam have right now when it comes to oil and gas in this state?
Well, there are cases where these foreign Islamic countries have ownership in oil and gas assets here in Texas. Yeah. And one of the things that I would look to would just be to add on to the current law, that's SB 17, as you know, that banned ownership.
Foreign land ownership.
Yeah. China,
Iran.
And Iran and places like that, enemies of America. I think we need to add the Islamic countries to that list as well.
All of them? I mean, that'd be a lot of them, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
You'd add all of them? Or
absolutely.
You'd ask the legislature to do that?
I would.
You also said you want to strengthen the Railroad Commission's partnership with allies such as Israel. What would that look like?
Well, look, I'm also not against, for instance, we're building, President Trump just announced this recently, building a new refinery down in South Texas in Brownsville. A lot of that came with financing from foreign countries. I'm okay with that. I think that if we can build things that benefit Texans and create jobs for Texans and profit opportunity for Texans and Texas companies, I think that's a good thing.
Do you support limiting the growth of data centers like so many people have called for in this state?
I think there's a lot of misinformation on data centers. I don't claim to be an expert on data centers. The businesses that I built have not been very, let's just say, technology heavy. So that's not an area that I'm astutely, educated on. But I will say this: I think that there are the issues that I hear people concerned about. Whether it's water, electricity, there are certainly ways that we can mitigate those concerns. I do know that there is a national security issue with data centers, and I know people have spoken about this on both sides. China is building them whether we want them to or not. Mm-hmm. And do we want them to be the AI leader in the world, or do we want America to be the AI leader in the world? And I think that there are trade-offs with anything. And I know that a lot of people, look, I'm a landowner. I don't necessarily want a big data center right next to my ranch. I've got a ranch in West Texas where there's giant windmills right next to, it just ruins the view of the ranch. And I don't really want a big data center right next to my ranch either. So I understand that people don't want these things, but there have to be ways that we solve for these issues. And I know Governor Abbott, to his credit, has come out with guidance on what he's looking for. And I think that this is a negotiation. It is partly educating the public, getting all the facts, getting through all the misinformation about it. And ultimately, I think Texans will decide what's best for Texas and for our economy. And there's a lot of opportunity there. So I think these are things we have to look at. I'm not the kind of person that says we're not going to do this at all. I think that's a mistake. I think we need to look at the ways that we can help Texas.
Bo, you're running against John Rosenthal, Democrat, career mechanical engineer. He worked in oil and gas for a number of years. He's a 4-term state rep. Why should Texans choose you over him with that actual experience in oil and gas?
Well, I have actual experience in oil and gas too, and I would argue that just because someone has been an engineer in oil and gas doesn't make them an expert in the industry. I think that's an absurd claim that he makes. I have been involved in numerous oil business. I've invested in lots of oil and gas deals, across the state. I've worked trading markets in oil and gas. It's something that I focused on my entire career. I would argue I know just as much, if not more, than he does about the oil and gas industry. And more specifically, I know about the business side of it, which is more important. Having some technical expertise in one narrow field is great. I mean, credit to him. I do find it interesting that in a recent interview, he talked about how he would prefer to be working in for a green energy company. So I don't think he's a big fan of the oil and gas industry. I know he wants to raise taxes on the industry. He wants to raise regulations on the industry. All of these things would be bad for the industry and raise costs on the industry, which, by the way, for the consumer means we have to have a higher oil price to justify exploring for oil and gas, which means that people are going to pay more at the pump. That's what his policies are going to lead to. My policies will do the exact opposite.
And people have heard that your family has an oil company, but you were directly involved in this with your brothers, you were telling me.
Of course, yeah. I'm fourth generation in the oil business. I've grown up in the business. I've worked in various aspects of the business my entire life. I started working for my family business in 1994 and have done various things with him. My father passed away in 2013, and my brothers and I have run that business since.
Let's talk about some controversy. You've been no stranger to controversy, as some folks might know if they follow the news, Bo. But at CPAC in March, when it was in Grapevine in North Texas, you were on a panel that called for Republicans to embrace Islamophobia. Do you think Muslim Texans are a threat?
I think that Islam is a threat. And the reason I think that is because I just listened to what the Islamic clerics all say, the imams that are even here in Texas. They're all over social media talking about what their plan is for the United States and for Texas. And I just say, it's not my opinion, just listen to what they say. They say that they want to implement Sharia law everywhere. They say that they want to subjugate everyone to Islam, make everybody submit to Islam. Well, that doesn't work with our Constitution, and so I think that in and of itself is a threat. So they say threatening things, I'm just amplifying, or highlighting the fact that what they say is we should believe them when they say it.
What should be done?
Well, I think there are a lot of things. Of course, a lot of this is a federal government issue. I think that when I've traveled the state and talked to people all over Texas, primarily young people who've been discriminated against their entire lives because we have allowed tens of millions, if not 100 million, I don't know what the real number is. There are people that say it's more than 100 million. There are people that say that it's 20 million. Whatever it is, it's too many because our housing costs are higher. Medical services have been degraded because we've had to put so much money into supporting people who are here illegally. We have foreigners, fraudulently acquiring H-1B visas everywhere.
Housing costs aren't higher because of immigrants and people who've come here.
Of course they are. That's an absurd claim. Think about it.
You think so?
It's supply and demand. We have a supply of housing. We have, just in the Biden administration, we know that they let in 20 million additional people into the country. What do you think that does to the cost of living? How do you buy a home or rent an apartment? All of those costs have gone up because there is more demand. That's just simple economics 101.
Let's talk about your online record as well. You created a lot of attention before you ran for this position with online posts about gay people, those with disabilities, women, Jews, Muslims. As far as I can tell, all these posts have been deleted. Do you regret any of those?
I'm not sure which ones you're talking about. I don't recall saying anything bad about Jews or women ever in my life.
I think the comment about women was women can only be trusted with some decisions, something to that degree.
Well, I don't think you should. I think that comment was about not trusting certain people, and the women who are wanting to abort babies. I think that's something that I find abhorrent. Our Republican Party platform specifically, addresses abortion and what that means. I am pro-life. I'm against abortion, and so you have radical leftist women who think that they ought to be able to, abort every baby in the world, and I just think that's abhorrent. I think it goes against my biblical values, and I think it goes against the pursuit of life, liberty, and happiness here in America.
Well, why did you delete those?
I've deleted a lot of things over the years. I've actually I downloaded a program a long time ago to reset my Twitter profile, and it ended up mass deleting a bunch of posts that I don't really know where they all went, but it did delete a bunch.
But was it a mistake to delete those, or did you specifically seek these out and knock these out of the?
No, like I said, it was a mass delete through some filter that that ended up deleting a bunch of things that I didn't intend to delete.
Gotcha. You're extremely popular with the Republican base. Outside, though, a lot of people might see you as divisive, Bo. Far-right firebrand, anti-immigrant, we just discussed here, maybe anti-Muslim as well, like we've talked about here. To win statewide, though, you have to win independents. And, the independents are the ones who decide every election, even though in Texas, they do lean to the right. What do you say to independents and some Republicans who might be skeptical of you?
Well, look, I think Texas is a red state. I mean, Donald Trump won it by 14 or 15 points just 2 years ago. I think that Texas will continue to elect Republicans because we actually have the solutions and the track record in Texas. Look, is every Republican perfect? Is everything Republicans have done perfect? Of course not. I mean, that's why we have a primary process. I am for spirited primaries. I think that's a good and healthy thing for the party. And look, I think even at the top of the ticket, our Republicans have moved to the right to address some of the issues that have been brought up in primaries. So, like I said, I think that's a good thing. I don't see it as controversy. I just see it as the voters are demanding Republicans stand for and fight for the things that they go vote for them for, right? I mean, we hear this on the national front with why is the Senate not passing the SAVE Act, for instance, when most people want that passed. Here in Texas, we have the criticism is, well, Republicans have been running the state for 30 years and look where we are. And I would say, well, we're still one of the best states in the country. And, we have incredible leadership here. And I think Governor Abbott has moved even more to the right over the last 4 years. I think that's demonstrable. I think even our speaker has moved to the right from where we were just, a few years ago. And so I think that, Texas is moving to the right because people recognize that the left have just fully embraced socialism, communism, everything that's the destruction of our culture. And I think most people find that abhorrent and want to move away from that.
But like for skeptical voters who have voted Republican in the past and look at you and say, yeah, I do vote Republican, but I've seen Bo a lot in the headlines. What would you tell them why they should vote for you?
Well, because like I said, I think people are hungry for, Donald Trump proved this 10 years ago. People are hungry for someone who's going to come in and fight for them. And having people in elected office who are very open about, look, I tell people, I'm not smart enough to lie to you, so I'm just going to tell you what I believe and what I'm going to do. And I did that as the Tarrant County GOP chair when I was there, and I think that is why I have risen in popularity among people online because I say things that people know to be true, and they're like, finally, someone is saying what I believe and what I think and what I feel, and it's refreshing to have people who are out there fighting for those things. I think we need to have people in office. Look, I'm a Republican. I think we need to have people in office who are fighting for our Republican Party platform that our grassroots spends a lot of time putting together. I'm a product of the grassroots, and I think that ultimately those ideas win out. And so I think voters will respond to that. Even the people who are in the middle, or even some Democrats, by the way. I know a lot of Democrats who are really against this whole, transgender indoctrination thing that my opponent seems to have embraced. He thinks we ought to spend money on chopping kids' private parts off. Most Texans, even a lot of Democrats, do not agree with that. I'm talking about the voters. The politicians are all kooks, I know. But a lot of the Democrat voters who are sort of in the middle, they're not for those things. They're more for traditional values. And so even some of those people, I believe, are going to cross over and vote for the Republican.
And there's no question that your time as Tarrant County GOP chair clearly raised your popularity. But you also said things that made a lot of headlines and might have turned off some folks. Do you regret any of those at all?
Well, I say this often, truth sounds like hate to those who hate the truth. And so when things come across as being controversial, it's because I've said something that is true that some people don't like that truth. And so they want to claim that it's hateful or something like that, but I don't regret anything I've said.
A couple last questions here too. During the primary, Governor Abbott said, quote, "You don't know anything about oil and gas." Abbott also said that your agenda would wreck the miracle that Texas has in producing more oil and gas than ever before. Then you defeated his candidate. The governor welcomed you. Have you spoken to the governor?
Yes, of course I have, yeah.
What did he say about that?
I'll be in Austin in a couple weeks, meeting with the governor again and his team.
Did he apologize to you for that?
No, look, we don't take these things personally. A primary, like I said, is a spirited campaign between two, competing sort of views of what the Republican nominee should be. And ultimately, my views won the day. And so the governor is smart. he recognizes that a lot of people voted for me and supported me. And so, of course he is, like I think everybody else is, on the Republican side of the ticket. We have to work together as a team because the people on the other side, the Democrats, are so radical. I mean, they literally could not have nominated any more radical people. I mean, up and down the ticket. They're, Tallarico gets a lot of headlines, and he's a radical left-wing kook. My opponent serves with him in the Texas House and is just as radical. I mean, their voting records are almost identical. On every major issue they have voted together. And so I think the Texans are going to reject maybe a Republican ticket that has some great people, some people that maybe you didn't support in the primary, and that's all fine. But come November, Republicans in Texas recognize that we need to continue the path that we're on and build on that. And yes, we can make some improvements here and there, and that's what the primary process does. It selects the people who are going to help implement that. But the view is also, it's binary. It's, do we support people who are at least logical and think about what's good for Texans and what's good for our culture, or do they pick someone who hates our culture and wants to destroy Texas? And that's what the entire left side of that ticket does.
Let me ask you the last thing here. Tell us something about Beau French that people might be surprised by.
Well, look, I've had a very blessed life. I've worked hard. I've done a lot of different things. I have tons of different experience. I've started businesses. I've fostered businesses. I've sold businesses. Like a lot of entrepreneurs, not everything I've done has been perfect or successful. I laugh at. I was friends with Boone Pickens, for instance. Boone Pickens famously, declared bankruptcy like 3 different times, right? But he was a well-known billionaire who did a lot of good things too. And so, Donald Trump has started lots of businesses. Not every one of them was successful, but he's been a very successful business guy. That's just my story as well. I mean, not to that level, of course. Yeah. I wish it would be. But I've started lots of businesses. Some of them have worked out really well. Some of them have not. That is the nature of being an entrepreneur. But I look at the world from the business perspective when it comes to like what this role is on the Railroad Commission. How can I go in and improve the business of the oil and gas industry? Because like I've said, I think it's the most important business we have. It's the largest business we have in Texas, and I believe it's the most important. I think there are national security implications. So I want to go in and vigorously defend our industry so that we can make it stronger, we can lower the costs so that it's better for consumers. This is good for everybody.
Any final message to voters?
Yeah, I think the message is pretty simple. This choice is binary. You want to vote for someone who's going to go in and make your life better because I'm going to help lower costs for you, or you're going to vote for someone who wants to raise taxes on the industry, raise regulations on the industry, increasing your costs, increasing energy prices affect everything, right? They affect your price at the pump, affect your electricity bill. So he's going to raise your costs, I'm going to lower them. I think that's an easy choice for people.
Beau, thanks for the time.
My pleasure, great to be here.
All right, and now to the Democrat running for the Texas Railroad Commissioner, John Rosenthal. He is a mechanical engineer. He worked in the oil and gas industry for more than 25 years, and he currently serves in the Texas legislature representing Houston. Rosenthal took questions from my colleague, Natalie Haddad.
John Rosenthal, thank you for joining us on Inside Texas Politics. Nice to have you here.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks for taking the drive up from Houston. So you're running for Railroad Commissioner, and I think, you represent parts of Houston, Cypress, some of the suburbs there. So you'll be a familiar name to those in Houston, but for the rest of the state who may be being introduced to you for the first time, who are you and why you, why now?
What a great question, and thanks for this perfect opening. So I am John Rosenthal. I'm the state rep for District 135, which is Northwest Houston. I'm a career mechanical engineer. I worked in the oil field industry for over 25 years. And Northwest Harris County has a lot of oil field industry in the area that I represent, also the Cypher Independent School District. People don't usually know about the Railroad Commission. It's the most important agency that people have never heard of because it has nothing to do with trains. The Railroad Commission of Texas regulates oil and gas operations in the state. Mm-hmm. So it's massively important to our energy infrastructure, to our economy, and it kind of flies under the radar. So a career engineer who's now had 4 terms in the Texas House, this was the time.
Speaking of this being a race that maybe we'll call at one time a sleepy race, a race that maybe others weren't paying a whole lot of attention to. For better or worse, this is a race that is now making headlines. What made you decide now was the time for you after 4 terms in the House?
So what it really was, the motivation for me for this started after Winter Storm Uri. In 2021, when our state lost power, people froze to death in their own homes, people perished in their cars trying to stay warm or charge their cell phones, and we came back into the legislature and they largely refused to act on the core issues for the problem, which was natural gas delivery. We make more electricity from natural gas in this state than any other form. And so it was at that time, that's when the seed was planted for me. I wanted to come back and do something about that. And this is me coming back to fix our energy grid.
Yeah, I was doing a little reading on your background. You started as a plumber's apprentice,
Yeah.
worked your way up into the mechanical engineer you are now the state representative. And I think some may argue that, respectfully, a state representative is different than running a large energy industry here in Texas. Texans feel very deeply about their energy and oil. What is your argument for that?
So before I ever got into politics, the career part of the engineering, I ran large-scale projects. I'm talking about billion-dollar subsea development projects. So I'm intimate with the technology. I'm also intimate with leading large teams, vast groups, engaged in massive undertakings. And I'm a technical expert on the industry itself. I've worked on drilling rigs and production platforms. I did work on pipelines and even in chemical processing plants. So I know the industry from the inside out. And now with a little bit of government experience, I think that uniquely qualifies me for this job.
Texas depends heavily on oil and gas. You don't need me to tell you any of this, but environmental advocates often want stricter oversight, which is something many Texans would probably push against. What would be your argument for that? Where do you stand on regulations when it comes to our oil and gas?
Excellent question. So I actually firmly believe our industry, the oil and gas industry of Texas, can be profitable and relevant and lead the country in energy production while being responsible to communities, neighborhoods, and the environment. And my position is we should enforce the regulations that we already have. Railroad commissioners don't get to make new laws. That's for the legislature. But the stuff that we have in place now in Texas, we should enforce the laws that we already have on the books.
So you are okay with what is already currently in place? Would you change anything?
There are things I would suggest. Let's start out by just enforcing the laws that we already have. And then in order to get anything done, there's going to have to be some consensus built. So there are 2 other commissioners. It's a 3-person panel. The agency has 1,000 employees and a $500 million budget. So there's consensus to be built. I'll work with the other commissioners and the legislature on stuff that I think we should all be able to agree on.
Where do you specifically draw the line with our current regulations, if anywhere?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
You mentioned there were a couple things you might suggest changing.
Oh.
Where do you draw the line?
So we already have rules in place about routine flaring, which is when you burn excess natural gas, either on a drilling rig or a production platform or facility. I do think we should be having stronger efforts to reduce that, capture the gas. It's an energy source. We burn $1.9 billion worth of natural gas into the air in Texas every year. It would be enough to provide natural gas for free to every household in the state that uses it. So it seems like we should be able to capture that, sell it, use the money from that to pay for the infrastructure.
Republicans will likely paint you as someone quite aggressive in regulatory efforts in this industry. What do you say to that?
So 4 elections now, and sometimes my opponents have tried to say that I'm a Democrat that wants to destroy the oil and gas industry. My answer to that is, it's literally how I make my house payments. I'm not looking to cut the legs out from my own household. And plus, it's 30% of the state's economy. And plus, the revenue from oil and gas pays for our schools, our universities, our parks and wildlife. It's a vital part of the Texas economy and the Texas culture. I'm all in to make sure that we're strong, profitable, and responsible.
Let's stay on the subject of your opponents and how you may be painted. You are running against the Republican Beau French. He has generated headlines as of recent over comments he's made on social media. I have some of them written down. I don't want to misquote. He's made some of these comments on the campaign trail and again online, including from top Republicans after posting a social media poll asking whether Jews or Muslims were a bigger threat to America. Do you believe a candidate's judgment or temperament on the campaign trail is a relevant problem to this race specifically?
In most cases, I would say no. In this case, having that kind of temperament where he's proud of being a racist, apparently has acknowledged this online. He's boldly against Muslims and Jews and actually anybody that doesn't look like him. Our oil and gas industry in this state is vastly diverse, and we do business with countries all over the planet. I personally have done jobs for Saudi Aramco, Egyptian Drilling, and the like. We do billions of dollars of commerce. I think it's important that we keep our business relationships alive and thriving. And in an environment like Texas, I think our oil and gas operators would prefer to have stability and sensible governance rather than chaos and culture wars.
You know, there will be voters who may or may not agree with him and overall may not care about the controversy if he is promising to fight for them. So why should the comments overall matter when choosing a railroad commissioner?
And again, in my personal opinion, they shouldn't matter. It's just this guy's so extreme that kind of temperament just is not a fit for management and oversight of our largest piece of the Texas economy. Also, he has no operational experience that I'm aware of. He has limited engagement with the industry overall. His family owns an oil company. He does not know the ins and outs of this business. So I'll be working with all of our stakeholders in and around this business, both from the environmental side and the industrial and the energy majors. And let's see if we can't build a consensus for sensible governance over culture wars.
I think this is a good pivot. You know, if voters were to put you and Mr. French side by side, what would you say is the biggest difference in what your current campaign talks are right now, what you are currently pitching to voters?
It's very good. So if people go to my website, johnrosenthaltx.com, you'll see a whole platform full of substantial, well thought out policy positions. I have no idea what he's forwarding. All I've heard is he thinks we have too much regulation already. I think we should enforce the regulations we have, strengthen our relationships both at home and abroad, keep Texas the energy leader that it already is.
Sure. Is there anything you and your opponent may potentially agree on?
There is.
Okay, let's hear it.
So I do believe we both agree that the commission should be renamed. It's not the Railroad Commission because it has nothing to do with railroads. How about we call it the Texas Oil and Gas Commission?
I think that's fair enough. Sure. Anything else you think, policy-wise, when it comes to this position, that you and Mr. French may agree on?
I haven't heard much policy from him, so I don't know.
Fair enough. I also would like to ask, you know, for better or worse, Mr. French is generating a lot of press. What is your strategy when it comes to name recognition? Sometimes some may argue that is the name of the game when it comes to a campaign. Down ballot voters exist.
It's true. And one of the big uphill battles running for railroad commissioner is for people to understand this is about your energy infrastructure. It's about keeping the lights on in the next winter storm. It's about lowering your electric bills. And so to elevate awareness for that purpose, it's probably good. The controversy that he stirs up, I find distasteful if not abhorrent, but if it raises awareness to the position and what's at stake here, it's probably good for the race.
You're headed to a couple of campaign stops here after your stop with Inside Texas Politics. What have folks been talking to you about their biggest concerns when it comes to subject matters of this position?
The biggest things that people talk to me about every day, and I am on the campaign trail every day, are our energy infrastructure, so making sure the lights stay on, our electric bills are too high, and we're still paying off a debt from that winter storm. And then the third, here's what's surprising. Republicans in rural areas talk to me about pollution and the environment. They're very concerned about pollution, especially in the Permian Basin, West Texas.
What is that stat you mentioned earlier about how much is being burned into our air?
Yeah, the flaring, but they're worried about the saltwater disposal. So water is produced when we bring oil and gas out of the ground. It's very toxic, very noxious, and you have to do something with it. It gets disposed of down in active wells. And then, after being stored there for many years, sometimes it erupts up. Just a few weeks ago, the only church in Grand Falls, Texas, right outside of Midland, Odessa, First Baptist Church, was basically flooded with noxious, oily, chemical water.
What happens when you get exposed to that?
Well, it can cause a number of issues. If there's sulfur in the water, hydrogen sulfide gas can cause headaches or respiratory problems, even death. It's just the same as any toxic chemical exposure. You just need to keep it off of you and outside of your body to stay safe.
Who do you think is going to be the hardest voter to crack? You are asking, you don't need me to tell you, it's been 30 years since a Democrat has held a statewide office. You are asking voters to change their course.
It's true.
Who do you think the toughest voter is going to be to crack?
I think the people I need to talk to are the energy workers and the agriculture and livestock workers. People who either own those businesses or work in those industries. Those are the ones directly affected, who will be aware of this and knowledgeable of the race. And so I'm going to focus my time on rural adjacent, and even Republicans. Remember, when I won in 2018, I flipped a district that was a deep red seat. Nobody thought it was winnable. And to do that, quite a number of moderate Republicans and a number of independents had to vote for me. Those will be the people I intend to talk to.
So is there a similar strategy here that you are following?
Absolutely.
Okay. Representative, I always end interviews with an open floor mic situation, a little different than how Mr. Whiteley sometimes conducts, but I do want to leave the floor open to you if there's anything that you'd like to talk about that maybe I didn't touch on.
I would just stress that this is the position that's the economic backbone of the country, Texas oil and gas industry. It's also responsible for making sure our energy infrastructure is more resilient and reliable. So if you froze during Winter Storm Uri and you want to fix those problems, if you feel like your electric bills are too high, I'm the guy to address those things. I'm the expert in this race. My opponent has no experience.
Representative Rosenthal, thank you for your time.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.